Like Jared said, today's topic is wealth transfer, how to do it biblically and pay less tax. And I think some of those things are the same. So want to make sure I'm sharing my screen. Jared, they can see that, right?
Oh, we can see
All
it.
right, excellent. So our last online seminar, we're able to cover kind of anticipated tax increases in your retirement plan. And I love doing that seminar. Some of it is just kind of a recognition that taxes will be going up. And I really would encourage you, if you haven't seen that seminar, go back and watch it. You'll get a link to that, of course, after being on the call today. And what was so interesting to me is going back and look at the history of taxation. I completely nerded out for a while. I love numbers. I love history, and combining the two was perfect. So actually learned a lot myself before giving that seminar, and it was a good time. And I think one of the takeaways from that seminar was something I said early on was I think it isn't so much that we just hate paying tax, hate the government, that whole thing, but more, paying some tax is a direct reflection of blessing our life. And I believe that. But I think many of us and many of my clients we talk to, it's more what is being done with those tax dollars. I think that becomes the problem. So for many of you, if you have a chance to go back, look at that seminar, we enjoyed making that. So another kind of a new thing coming to our firm is just yesterday, I sat for the exam to become a certified Kingdom advisor. I was hoping today to be able to share with you that I passed that exam and we could all cheer together. However, they have to grade that yet. So it's I think it's a 4-week process to get graded and back to us. So maybe I'll share with you a little bit what it is and why it was important to me. I am a believer and have been since a kid, but I think learning how to be a Christian and an advisor, or being a Christian advisor, different things, and trying to help people see that, whether you're a person of faith or not, being a Kingdom advisor for me became a very important thing. The group was formed by a guy named Ron Blue. He was the founder of a very large financial company, and ended up really making this designation. I think there's something like 3,000 different financial designations somebody can get. This one was, to me, the most important right now as far as where we're at in our business and what we're trying to do for our clients. So more to come on that. We'll all celebrate, I'm sure, when we get the notification that I passed that, or you'll hear from me when I pass it. But yeah, that was a lot of fun going through that. And some of the material, in fact, a lot of the material we're covering today came from Ron Blue and their group. So I'm excited to share that with you. Another comment as we kind of get into, and I think the biblical side of wealth transfer really, to me, comes down to being a good steward. And if any of you have worked with us in the past or seen our logo, it's got this kind of cool tree on it, and there's these 3 T's on the logo. And many people shared with me, wow, that's a neat way to use your last name, Taatjes, and have that in your logo. And we don't market on this, but it is something in the background of our company. As a reminder to me, it doesn't have anything to do with my last name. Those 3 T's stand for time, talent, and treasure. And when we get into one of the most important scripture verses in my life, or scripture, the parable of the talents, found midway through Matthew 25. If you haven't heard that, I'm going to paraphrase real quick. But basically, there was a master who was about to go on to a long journey, and he left 3 servants, one with 5, one with 2, one with 1 talent. And when he came back from this vacation or wherever he was, he came back and he asked, what did you guys do? What did the 3 of you do with these talents? And the individual who had given 5 talents actually doubled it, turned his 5 to 10. And he received the answer from the master, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over little, so I'll give you much. Come and enjoy your master. Second guy comes and he reports to the master, says, I've actually doubled what you've given me, the 2 talents, to now 4. And it's interesting, he received the exact same response, word for word. Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over little, and I will give you much. Come enjoy with your master. Third guy, however, came back with the one talent. He said he was full of all these excuses, and he was saying, I didn't dare take any risk. I didn't dare, blah, blah, blah. But the long story short is I just buried it. I didn't do anything with that talent. And the master then says to him a very different message, says, take what's been given to him and give it to the one who had 10 talents. For everyone who's been given more will be given, and he will have abundance. But the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And some people are bothered by that last part. And I just feel like it's a great way to remind us, hey, we've all been given things. We've all been given different levels of talents, whether that be our time, talent, or treasure. And being good stewards of that means that we see it in a different view. We take what we have, and we're called to do more with it. We're called to not just bury it in a hole like the guy who had one talent, but we're actually called to make it grow, to really steward what we've been given. And I would say if you're on this call today, it probably means, number one, you live in the United States of America. You've got more wealth than most of the world. You likely have many, many talents because most likely you're in this retirement age bracket. You've learned a lot of talents, and so you've got time, you've got talent, you've got treasure. You're a phenomenal group of people. And I think a lot is asked of this group of people. And when it comes to stewarding our financial resources, I think today's call just fits really well with that. So moving on, there was a guy that had a lot of wealth named Andrew Carnegie back in the 1800s. And he actually wrote it was kind of an article of sorts called The Gospel of Wealth, which later became renamed just Wealth. Super interesting to read and to follow what the Carnegie family did and how they passed wealth on to the next generation. But I'll read with you, and it's on the screen there, one of the best quotes from that. And I think it applies to us today. This then is held to be the duty of the man with wealth. First, to set an example of modest, unostentatious living, shunning display or extravagance, to provide moderately for the legitimate wants of those dependent upon him. And after doing so, consider all surplus revenues, which come to him simply as trust funds, which he is called upon to administer. I love that quote. I've seen very many wealthy people called to continue to grow what they have, but to continue to be good stewards of that. Not necessarily just to accumulate more for themselves, but to be able to give more and to be able to provide both through their families, but also for many different charities, and utilizing some of the techniques that we'll talk about today. So I think it's really interesting looking back at how that family has passed wealth throughout the generations versus some of the others, the Rockefellers, et cetera, at that time. If you ever want a great study, it's a great thing. And I could talk probably for 20 minutes just on that alone. We won't do that. I simply want to share that quote because, again, today is not about setting a income limit or this is too much or that's too much. It's about being a good steward. Looks differently for everyone. I think going back to the Matthew 25 parable, the guy that had 5 turned it to 10, he got the same answer as the guy who got 2 turned it to 4. All been entrusted with different levels of talents, and it's up to us to steward them well. And that's really what today's call is about. Part of being a good steward is making sure that the next steward is ready to receive the wealth. And one of the things that we want to talk about today is, again, this idea of wealth transfer, how and why that's important. And it's key that we remember that it's not estate planning. It can look similar, but it has a very different take on it. And I want to highlight a couple of those differences for you guys because a lot of people hear wealth transfer and they right away go to estate planning, life insurance, something like that. There's a few key differences in what a wealth transfer plan and an estate plan looks like. First of all, knowing that our wealth transfer plan needs to look at the beneficiary impact. again, getting back to being a good steward, our resources will be spent by and will be used by somebody else. So making sure the beneficiary is the impact on the beneficiaries look first and foremost. Whereas estate planning would probably look more on you being the donor and the estate tax impact of the plan. Wealth transfer begins now. So we're looking at what's going on now. It doesn't wait until death or close to death. It's a very key differentiator. I believe wealth transfer is a better stewardship-driven mentality than what estate planning is. Estate planning tends to be very tax efficient driven. Believe me, again, we're going to talk about paying less taxes, and there's ways to do that. But the ultimate driver behind what we're talking about is stewardship driven. I believe that wealth transfer, because of the way it highlights being a good steward, also is more God honoring than what I've seen in some estate planning. When you read estate planning, it always comes back to make sure you pay a little tax, make sure you do this, make sure you do that. I want to make sure that we're not trying to honor ourselves here, but ultimately honor God. And then finally, transferring ownership now, beginning the process now, today, versus what estate planning typically looks like, which tends to retain control as long as possible. And I think there's a mindset shift that I think people need to really get around when they start talking about wealth transfer. The mindset shift is got to change in my mind from, I'm going to keep and accumulate and keep all this stuff here. And then a little bit goes on to charity, goes on to kids, whatever it might be, until death. And then poof, it all happens. Wealth transfer has a much different look in that it starts now. And I think that becomes the key differentiator, is a mindset shift between later on and today. And that's very, very important to remember after this call today. Why the urgency? Why are we talking about this right now? And for me, it comes down to, some of it, the Kingdom Advisor work I've been doing, certainly, but also I had a meeting a few months ago with a client who was talking about their situation. He said, she was a widowed woman, and she had talked about, she had a few children. She said, my kids, I've got these 3 children. I've got to get them my land right now. We've got like this, several hundred acres of land, and they've got to get it right now because there's all this estate tax changes coming. The government's changing everything. The new administration this, the new administration that. Just the very talk of a change meant, oh man, I've got to get this done today. And I had to ask her that some of that sounds okay, but I never want people to do planning based on life planning based on tax changes. I don't want, especially not just the talk of potential tax changes, to make people do things that both they and their children aren't ready for. So I had to ask her, I said, how would it look different for your kids today? Because I think they were each going to get something like 250 acres of farmland. And hey, we're in rural Minnesota here. Farmland's worth, a lot right now. What would that look like to your children to all of a sudden be worth multi-millions of dollars? And I think, were they ready for that? And I think the last thing I want to do is to cause more problems than we're causing solutions when it comes to this. So when I think about that meeting, some of what was she was thinking about made sense, right? Yes, I think taxes are going to increase. I think if you certainly listen to our last seminar, if you watch what our government's spending today, we got to pay that back. So definitely taxes are increasing. We don't know the ramifications of that, but we got to be ready and ready to make changes if that does happen later this year and they actually announce some of the changes. The other urgency is, it might sound funny, but you're still alive. If you're on this call today, you're still alive. It allows you to start doing this planning. You've got more control, okay? You've got far more options. You can help with family dynamics, guys. I think that's something that's very important. We'll talk about that a little bit. It allows you to kind of see how things are going to play out within the family earlier rather than later. Some of you are thinking, I don't want to see what the kids are going to do with it. And I get it. But I think if you're able to encourage and coach them throughout getting that wealth, I think that wins over having family problems after your death. And then finally, it's good stewardship. Like we're talking about, I believe in my heart that, like, again, we're called to steward whatever God's given us. So when we look at that, part of that is transferring it to the next generation. And the urgency comes from, hey, we're still living. We don't know how many days we have in this life. Some of you, even on the call today, are either going through health issues. Some of you are probably, lost loved ones. We don't know what the future holds. So being part of being a good steward is preparing and being ready for whatever comes. So that's kind of the urgency. Really started from that one meeting and feeling a little uncomfortable with how that meeting went. And it was great to be able to coach this client and talk through, but also it left me with, I've got to get more information out there so people don't make decisions that maybe they're not ready for, or certainly their children aren't ready for. I think there's 3 questions that when it comes to wealth transfer, and it comes to really being a good steward, I think more than anything, what do we got to answer? The first one is who owns it? I believe that, again, we're stewarding our resources. Ultimately, God's title is on everything you have. This is a journey I'm walking through myself right now. I can tell you that when we think about, being a good guide for our clients, we can't guide somebody. Like, think about a guide through the mountains. They can't guide somebody through the mountains unless they've been on the trail themselves. I'm walking this right now, but being able to say, God, this is yours. It's something that's pretty close to me right now. How much is enough? I'm walking that journey too. When do we get to that point where we can say, my income is here, everything else is going to charity, everything else is going to children, or whatever it might be. I think that's a key thing that we have to consider in order to be a good steward. And the last one, and this is my favorite, is the next steward chosen and prepared? I'm walking this right now, guys, for sure. And I got to tell you, I got 2 little girls at home, and they're not little anymore. Some of you have known me from the beginning of this company over almost 20 years ago, and watched these girls on our little Christmas cards grow up. And now one did her driver's ed today. She's turned 16 in September. It's crazy. The other one's 13 and kind of in the teenager stage, and they're both awesome kids. But preparing them for what wealth they will get someday, preparing them to be good stewards is really a huge thing in my life right now. My dad did it for me. He did a very good job. We had this thing called the Jesus jar. There's a little jar that sat on the counter, and we'd always take 1/10 of our money. We'd put it in there. And I can tell you, I learned a lot of lessons from that, because there was a time when I actually took a few things out of the Jesus jar to spend on something for myself, and then had to refill it. So I'm trying to teach my kids this. And sometimes, guys, I feel like I'm not doing a great job. This next slide would highlight that a little bit. If you can see that, I'm hoping if you are chuckling, I can't hear you. This is on my, when you walk into our home, you'll see there's a little landing area where, coins and stuff goes, and gift cards. You can see one over there in the corner. It's just this little holding spot. And my daughter has started to work. This is Addys, my younger, and she's starting to get some income. She's worked a little bit cleaning the office. She's done some rock picking, all this stuff, and we're trying to get her to tithe and to do all these things. One of the things that I started with my kids years ago was, if you put money into your mutual fund, I'm going to match it dollar for dollar, 100% rate of return, no matter what you put in. It wasn't that long ago where my daughter actually had some money sitting in this little container out loose, and it said Addys money, and I took it. I assumed I was supposed to invest it in a mutual fund. You can double your money. Why not? Well, I took her $150 and turned it into $300. I thought she was going to think that was very nice of me. She didn't think so. In fact, from now on, what she does is she has this envelope here. It says Addys money. Do not touch, not for a mutual fund. But when I look closer, I got to where, hey, we're starting to get to these kids a little bit. See this little word here? Not all for a mutual fund. So I think she's getting it. I sure hope she's getting it. But we're trying to coach and teach her, but it's fun for me to be part of that. So preparing the next steward, really important. Why is it so difficult? Well, it's difficult for several different reasons. Some of it's because we're trying to teach this stuff to our 13-year-olds, but also I think it's important because it's so hard to realize how do we help our heirs without actually hurting them? Can we give them too much? To my story earlier, can I give too much to kids too fast? That's a key thing to look at. Sibling rivalry and expectations. When you consider your kids and how they consider the wealth, what they'll do with it, and with each other. I don't have time to go into the full story, but it's a very interesting thing to look at. I met Dave Ramsey years ago. A lot of you know that, and actually got to sit down with his son Daniel and hear some of how their dad had kind of done this exact thing, just treating the kids differently. But I think treating your heirs fairly means treating them uniquely. It's exactly what Dave had done. Is he took his son Daniel with this unique set of skills. One of his daughters handles the charitable foundation. Another daughter, Rachel's, in the business actively, but they all have different, unique skills, all different things. Family business dynamics also, that makes it very difficult. Some people on the call today have kids that are in their business, some that aren't. How do we balance that? How do we make sure that works? A couple sideline items. Make sure you separate owners from managers. The best families I know, and many of them are right here in our area, have done a great job of that. And then also, again, looking at uniqueness. It's really, really important when you look at transferring that wealth. What's fair is not always equal, guys. It just isn't. What's equal is not always fair. So we have to make sure we're considering the uniqueness of your children, the uniqueness of their situation before you're looking at the exact same dollars going to different kids. And finally, the last one, if you're married, how do we balance providing for our spouse someday, but also providing for the kingdom? How do we make that balance? How do we make that work? Other ones that I didn't even put on this list are, how do we finish strong? If you're in that mode of, I don't want to start giving wealth away because I'm still trying to grow. That's okay, but I think we got to key in on being a good steward and making sure, again, that we're starting this process of wealth transfer. The next one, some perspectives and why we're talking about wealth transfer is, first of all, understanding I will die. It may sound real simple, but when you start looking at it like, hey, I know that I will die someday. The second one, I will take nothing with me. We all know that. You always hear there's no U-Haul behind a hearse, the whole thing. I mean, it's very, very true. I think back to another Carnegie thing he said is something about how it's a very difficult, terrible thing for a man to die very, very wealthy. I believe that. I believe you can die, not with your last check bouncing, but maybe somewhere in between. I think should be our goal. I will probably die at a time that I did not anticipate. Like I said earlier, we don't know. We don't know what our days look like. Again, that's a perspective you have to consider. Someone else is going to get your stuff. Someone else is going to spend your money. It might be your children, maybe it's charity, but it won't be you, all of it. And what I've seen in a lot of our meetings over the last several years, because the markets have been so good, there's this mindset of I'm going to put money away, and it gets to a certain level. And what's happened is, because things have grown a lot, people say, I'm just going to pull the interest off. I'm just going to pull 5%, whatever. And all of a sudden the accounts keep growing and growing and growing. I think if that's happening and we're not depleting our accounts over time, what's going to end up happening is somebody else will spend your money. That might be okay, but again, we have to highlight that we have to prepare the one that's going to be spending it. And most likely, they'll be your heirs. And then this last one, you can only decide before you die who gets your stuff when you die. So to remember that the control of being able to do this, I'm not talking about being controlling, I'm talking about taking control of what happens before you pass away, and being able to be part of that is really an important part of this perspective idea behind wealth transfer. Okay. So I say all that to kind of get into our process, and really, I think the best process to follow this wealth transfer idea, and to make sure that we're being good stewards. So there's actually 6 T's that I'm going to cover today. 6 T's to wealth transfer, and the first one you can see there is transfer, and what that just means is there's really only 3 things, 3 entities, or 3 ways that your money will, your assets will go someday. Okay, that's it. There's 3. They will go to your heirs, go to charity, or taxes and expenses. And I know for most of you, the last one, tax and expenses, is probably not in your priority. But the first thing you have to decide, and in part of the process, is who do I want to transfer the assets to? Some of you on the call, they're very charitable. You actually prioritize charity above your heirs. Some of you would say, no, my heirs, I want to make sure they're provided for in a proper way. So I need to start transferring assets to them. Many of you, it's a combination of both. I do not have a single client today in over 1,000 families that I serve in our group that has come in and said, one of my goals is to transfer money to the government someday. We don't have any of those. If that's you, might not want to be on this call. And again, it's not because I don't feel like we should pay 0 taxes, but it's just maybe I think I'd rather my heirs get it or charity versus the government. The second T there is treatment. Okay, so this gets back to the idea of, am I going to treat my kids or my heirs equally, or am I going to treat them uniquely? I'm a believer that we should treat them uniquely, which means it isn't always going to be the same. Think of if you've got one of your children going through a painful divorce or something. You've got another child that's doing very well financially. Oh, I helped with the divorce, so now I've also got to give a bunch of money to my child that's doing well. I would tend to disagree with that. I would tend to think that if we love our children equally, we should treat them uniquely and look at what is best for that individual at that time. Okay. The next T of the 6 is timing. Okay. Are we going to begin our transfer currently or deferred? And what we're talking about there is, can I start this process today, or am I going to start it 5 years from now, 10 years from now? I'm going to defer it even until death. I am a huge proponent of current, the timing being more current, starting early. It allows us to not only be in control, but to be able to enjoy, really to enjoy some of seeing what our children are doing with the gifts that we're giving them. It allows us to give currently to charities that we support. What a wonderful thing to be able to see and pour into a charity that you support. God says, where our heart is, it's where our treasure is. I mean, if we're pouring into those charitable entities slowly, we get tax benefits. That's great. But if we're starting now and they don't get a pile of money someday, they get it now. We get tax benefits. We get to really walk alongside our charities, see what they're doing, be really a bigger part of what they're doing. So if we can create a charitable giving plan that allows it to be current, that's really what we're after. The next T is title. When are you going to transfer title? If that's your business, is that now? Is that later? Are you ready? Are they ready? I think the other piece of title is, again, understanding God's the true owner of this. Okay. Again, we're stewarding that asset. We're stewarding, whether it be our business, our retirement accounts. I see our jobs here as a steward of your funds for many of you, but we're ultimately stewarding his resources. I think that's a key thing. We talk about title. And then that last one there, giving with no expectations, no strings attached. If there's gifts that are happening, I love it when we can watch, whether it be your children or a charity, to watch those gifts. I don't like it when I see people like, oh, you did this with that money I gave you. Now you're not going to get any more. Or this charity over here included a great letter that says, this is what you should do with it. This is how it should be done. Let them be them. Certainly, if you're giving money to a charity as part of your transfer, you probably will choose them wisely. And if you're doing it slowly, you're able to make changes if you need to, if you feel like that charity has changed really how they're doing things. So again, there should be no expectations. Don't give for a thank you. There should be no strings attached. Finally, I want to get into some of the specific tools and techniques. I think we've got at least 15 minutes left in our talk. And I know I'm trying to fly through this material, guys. If you have questions as I'm going through this, hopefully you're asking them. But I wanted to make sure we could cover kind of that background to it. One of the things that you'll notice about the tools and techniques is this is the fifth thing in the process. It's not number one, it's not number 2, 3, or 4, it's number 5. So many times, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but a lot of, like, if you look at an insurance salesman, for example, the agenda would look different than what we're doing. The agenda would look, hey, I have a tool I need to sell to make sure that this gets accomplished, okay? And ultimately the goal is that the person makes some income, or there's a product sold, or whatever it is. I feel really strongly that this does not come up until like the 5th step, okay? I have used life insurance policies. I think it's a phenomenal way to transfer wealth. But if you're going to use that, it should not be the first thing, okay? This is something I've learned in my years doing this business. It's changed over the years. But a key thing for me has been this line right here. Tools and techniques are not the objective. They are used to accomplish the objective. So we're going to come up with step 1, 2, 3, and 4, coming up with all those objectives, having those conversations before we actually use one of the tools and techniques at our disposal. So key differentiator there between how an advisor is going to do their work versus a group that's maybe trying to just sell a product of some kind. The second thing there is never use a trust because of a lack of trust. We're going to talk about a trust. There's so many different kinds of trusts, but it's not generally a good idea to set it up because you don't trust someone. Okay. There's many reasons I would use a trust. There's trusts for, children who aren't old enough. There's trust, special needs trust. There's, trusts for, the AB trusts. There's so many different things. And they're very great tools, but I wouldn't use it because I don't trust someone. Okay. So a few of the tools and techniques, I'm just going to cover these 6, looks like. There's so many more things that we could talk about today. But I want to start with these 6. I'm going to do them in order of simplicity to more, probably a little bit more in depth. Some of you, there will be things here that won't apply to your situation. Again, this is based on education. This is based on general ideas. The idea is that if you wanted to see some of this, if you wanted to see what we're talking about today, you would have a meeting with us. You'd have a meeting with another trusted advisor and say, here's something I heard. Should I consider it? Okay. And then you meet with your CPA. You meet with your attorney. You get down to with your advisors, your quarterback handling this and helping you with this stuff. First one there, super simple. If you are an individual who is trying to prepare their kids to handle wealth, and you're in a situation where they can handle some gifting, and only you know that, I believe that there's this $15,000 annual gift exclusion, which almost everybody of higher wealth should be using. Most of you are, if you're on this call. Really what that means is that every single taxpayer today can give $15,000 a year to any one person, and they don't pay tax on it. You don't get an income tax deduction for it. It's just gone. It's just a simple transfer. It doesn't affect what you can give away at death. It doesn't affect your gifting, your gifting exclusion. So you just can give 15 grand away. It might not sound like a lot, but if I'm married, now I can give $30,000 because I can give 15, my wife can give 15. If I have 2 children, my wife can give them 15. I can give them each 15, And if my kids are married, now I can give them to their spouses. And if they have children, give them their spouses. I've seen people utilize this in excess of $100,000 a year out of their estate because they've got kids and grandchildren. And whether that gift be going into a 529 plan or something along those lines, we do a lot of those, or it's just an outright gift for an individual. I think it's a great thing and super simple. It might be too simple for some of you on this call, but I think it's something that too many people just kind of forget about or they don't know is there, but makes a ton of sense for most taxpayers today of higher net worth. The second one is Roth IRA matching. That is a technique that we started using. We have a particular client, very high net worth, who is really trying to get their children involved in investing. They were able to see in their accounts with us what time, over long periods of time, how much wealth they can build. It's like, I want our kids to see that. I don't want our kids someday when we're gone to number one, not know their advisor, but also not know the power of what investing can do in the long run. So what they said is, let's start some Roth IRAs for the kids, and their kids are old enough, they do earn an income, and started putting money into their Roth. And they can put $6,000 a year, but we're going to put $3,000, and they can get up to the next $3,000 as a match, kind of like you do with a 401k match, but it's their own way of involving their kids in investing, involving their kids in a slow wealth transfer. Okay, now that would go against their $15,000 exclusion. But again, it's a great way to use that as a matching gift for your kids and teach them about investing, teach them how to be good stewards themselves. So someday they don't just get a pile of money. When we're talking about preparing kids to handle wealth, whether they're 13 like my daughter or they're 35, investing and being a good steward of your money and understanding some of that is the first step. Seeing money work over time, extremely, extremely important that we show them that. We teach them, let them make some mistakes with a small amount versus a large amount. Let them learn what it's like to have a trusted advisor, let them learn those things. Very, very important. The third item there is a donor advised fund, a fantastic way. Now this one's more along the lines of charitable giving, a fantastic account that we can set up or help you set up, which allows you to put significant resources all at once into an account, which then you can slowly gift out of over time, okay? I don't see this as a way to control and to keep the money, but I see it as a tax efficient way to put a large amount of money, and we use it for many different reasons in our firm, but we'll use it so we can use something called bunching and save some income tax and get some wealth transferred out all at once. There's a lot of different ways we use a donor advised fund. Would love to share that with some of you in more detail. Next one is irrevocable life insurance trust. This is for many wealth transfer experts, this is all they would use, but it is a very utilized and actually very efficient way to pass wealth on the next generation. Remember, if it's life insurance, it's already income tax free to your children. If it is in a trust, like an ILET or irrevocable life insurance trust, it also is estate tax free. So again, I want to make sure you understand double tax free and allows you to pass wealth to the next generation. The problem with it is it still will wait till you die to get a pile of money to your children, okay? So I would probably use that in conjunction or as part of a gifting strategy of some kind. Because I think many of you don't want to just pass away someday and then your kids get all kinds of wealth. The next one, charitable trust. And there's so many. I don't even want to get into all the different nuances of those. And by the way, the irrevocable trust, charitable trust, and the next one will cover the intentionally defective grantor trust, all things that we would do with an attorney there. They would have to help us with that process. But the idea behind the charitable trust is there's different types of them, but ultimately the idea is that you're involving a charity earlier and you're allowing yourself to get some income back, or the other way around, we're actually giving income to the charity, and they all work very differently. The idea is a charity is involved, and whether that be a charitable remainder annuity trust, charitable remainder unit trust, There's so many different types. And there's all these different acronyms to these things too. In fact, yesterday when Jared and I are putting this together, I'm like, yeah, we got to talk about, CRTs, and we got to talk about CRATs, NIM, all this. He's like, what are you talking about? And so we had a good chuckle just with all the weird names that they've come up with these things. There's no way that I can cover these things today, other than let you know that if you have a charitable intent, but yet you want some income yet, there are things you can do to reduce and to begin, reduce size of your estate and begin really planning and involving charities earlier rather than waiting until you pass away someday. And the last one, I believe that the IDGIT, I know it's a weird name, but the intentionally defective grantor trust could be something that gets used a lot this year if there are some significant changes that come. I can't get into the, again, all the nuances of how it works, but essentially it allows us to get growth of an asset outside of your estate. But the fact that it's intentionally defective, that's defective, it comes down to the income tax ramifications of a trust. It allows the trust to stay, or the asset to be not trust tax, which would be individually taxed. So that's kind of the idea behind that. I can't get into any more detail on it because we're going to run out of time, and because it turns out looking more like legal advice versus just education and trying to help you guys understand some of the things that are out there. But that's something I do believe this year could be a major use, depending on what gets passed later this year with both income taxes and estate taxes. Each one of these ways will save you some income tax. If you're gifting money outside of your estate, you're paying less income tax. Somebody else is paying that tax. If you're there's so many ways to be a good steward, guys, to be to transfer wealth and do it biblically. All of these things. I'm a believer that every day when I come to work, if I'm doing my job, part of it is helping people steward their resources for the kingdom. Each one of these tools can be used in that to accomplish that goal. The last T of the wealth transfer process is the talk. I think too many times we end with the fifth step. We get some tools and techniques to accomplish the first four, and we forget about the talk. Number one, be talking with them regardless of if you are passing wealth down. Train the next generation in terms of your values, goals, priorities. Many times I have conversations with our clients like, we're going to be here for your children someday. The things that you're sharing with me, I will share with your kids. It comes up a lot as well. I hope our kids don't sell the land. Have you told them that? Have you encouraged them and shown them what that does? I can tell them, but believe me, I think it comes best from you, the donor. Here's what's important to us. Here's how we've created wealth. Here's how we feel this is what's important. This is how we expect you guys to continue our legacy of giving to charity. There's so many things there that if we're training them in terms of values, goals, and priorities that you've had, believe me, if you're on this call today, you've done some things right. You have some wealth. Otherwise, this topic wouldn't have interested you. But are we training them in the most important aspect? And I think the wisdom principle, this comes directly from Ron Blue. I love this quote. Never pass wealth without passing wisdom. Wisdom may create wealth, but wealth does not guarantee wisdom. Isn't that great? Just thinking about, we're going to pass wisdom on to our kids, but making sure we pass more wisdom than we do wealth. I think that should be the goal. If we can pass more wisdom than wealth, that should be our ultimate goal there. And then finally, it seems a little self-promoting to have your own quote in your own presentation. But here we go. This was something that came up after writing the book and after really reviewing with a lot of clients and trying to help them understand what legacy is. We hear about legacy all the time. You're like, yeah, I'm doing some legacy planning, which for most people, that means buying some life insurance. But I'm doing legacy planning. I got my will, trust, and everything comes down to money. I think legacy has very little to do with money. I think legacy has everything to do with people impact. It's that lasting impact that you have on the next generation, which continues the next generation. The money won't last that long. Believe me. Look at Andrew Carnegie, their wealth. Look at Rockefellers. The money won't last, but the wisdom can. So what I want to make sure is we look at this idea of legacy and inheritance. We never confuse legacy with inheritance. Legacy is your lasting impact on people. Inheritance is the money that your kids get to spend. It's really an important differentiator there that we do look at. Both are important. I think we need to plan for some inheritance. I think that's okay to plan, as long as our children, as long as they're prepared to be a steward like you are. And then also the legacy. Notice that's first. Consider your legacy, which won't be the financial assets that you leave behind. That's our last slide of this presentation, guys. I feel like that was like drinking from a fire hose, like crazy. A lot of information there. I hope it was beneficial to many of you, to some of you, that you were able to learn about, our heart for stewardship. Some definitely a few ideas. Maybe you heard just one thing that you can take back to your family, take back to your really your ability to steward just a little bit better than what you have. So Jared, if you're on the line, have we got questions, or we got people that have been asking anything, or is anybody awake? I can't see their faces, so I'm assuming.
We are awake. Why don't you unshare your screen, Ben, so we can see you full screen? Yes, I encourage everybody to use the chat feature if they haven't already. If you have questions, we did get one question here so far, but as we're answering this question, again, have some additional thoughts, comments, or questions, please feel free to put those in the public chat. Here's one question, Ben. My daughter is a toddler, and I want to build and share stewardship habits and attitude early. You mentioned, Ben, mutual fund matching or Roth matching. What is the best tip for starting strong? Sounds like this person has, again, some young kids. So how do you begin to shape and mold the next generation even at that young age?
I love that question, and I think you can never start early enough. I wouldn't say you need to start like an envelope system or anything like you saw with my daughter at 13 there. But I think it starts with, at that age, they need to see you put money in the offering plate to be a good steward. I think just to see the way you live, to start understanding investments. Obviously, a toddler won't understand that. You look at specific types of account that you can open at that age. 529 plan would be my first go-to. Just get it started. A 529 plan, which is a college savings plan, like a Roth for college, allows you to put money into an account. The grandparents can put money into the account if they want, share it with, instead of giving them some random plastic toy. Hey, grandparents, we'd rather have $100 for the college account and then a small gift for our toddler. I'm sorry, grandparents, we don't need more toys. That is a lasting thing you can do. Those accounts can be open. The problem with the Roth IRA, you got to have some earned income. I would much rather be a Roth, but they got to have some earned income before you can really start that process for them. And then finally, when they're old enough, when they have the Roth IRA, show them what an investment is right from the beginning. Get them excited about a company. Find a company that you like. Find a mutual fund that holds some investments that you can align with, and make sure they see that. I love when my kids are like, hey, that's Yeti. We have a little bit of Yeti stock. We like our Yeti cups, whatever it might be. Hey, it's Visa, whatever the companies are that you're investing in, to allow your kids to see that growth, whether it be a mutual fund or individual investment, is really, really important.
Ben, we got about 8 minutes left max. Again, folks on this call, feel free to use the message feature or the chat feature to message me any questions that you have. I guess I'm putting myself in the shoes of people on this call, Ben. Like, you threw a lot of stuff at them. We went through the process. You went through tools and techniques, the talk. You mentioned just start having the conversation with your kids. Where should people start putting this all together? Because you mentioned an advisor, an attorney, your kids, estate plan. I mean, where do people even begin with this process?
Well, the question we've been asking a lot of clients in meetings lately is, two things. Are you ready, and are your kids ready? Simple as that. And the are you ready is, do you have the basic documents in place? Because some of you on this call maybe don't have a trust, maybe just the simple estate planning documents. Are your kids ready? That comes down to, Are they starting to understand or see what wealth might look like someday? And I think that probably the best place to start, again, this is going to sound self-promoting, but meet with us. If you have a trusted advisor that you think would line up with some of the things I just talked about, meet with them. I think it's important that you start there. To go into an attorney's office and start getting billed hundreds of dollars an hour to have these general conversations and get steps 1 through 4 done, I think would probably not be the best way to do it. So you start with 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the process. We can help with that, okay? And really, before you even do that, sit down with your spouse. Sit down with your spouse if you're married and just start talking about this today. Start praying together and think, okay, what do we have? What have we been entrusted with? Number one, be very thankful for that, but and then say, are we doing what we can to pass it on? What's important to us? And then just kind of start feeling your way through that. But I think it starts with meeting with a third party like us to just talk through the exact things we talked about today. And many of you, we talk about all those trusts and the IDGIT, all that. I mean, many of you won't use that. I know some of you probably are, but the key there is get started. There's some of those things we talk about won't apply to some of you. Some of them you should be using, and everywhere in between. So we just want to make sure you start properly there with getting a good start with the process, starting with a meeting.
One last chance for any questions you have, put them in the chat here. We have just a couple of minutes at most left here in the call. I love what you said, Ben, about just starting the conversation with kids. I know we have a lot of farmers as clients. There's probably a number of farmer people on this business in this call. Either they have a business, but I think what you said being very important to start molding and shaping. Don't maybe start with the kids, start with your spouse, figure that out, pray through that, but then really just using your time so wisely to have very intentional conversations with your kids. I mean, that we do that with our kids, and our kids are very young. I mean, like you said, I don't think there's an early enough time to start that process. Whether you've talked to an attorney or anything like that, that could come someday.
That can be way down the road.
Right.
Ultimately, and again, if you're on the call today, you've got wealth, and you just living in this country is phenomenal. It's just, we're really, really blessed here.
No.
You've got a lot to give, the time, talent, treasure, whether it be you're talking money, you're talking, the talents, you got time to give to the kids. I think you just start very much just coming to that realization that we've been given a lot, and that we've been entrusted with a lot. We've got to do a lot with it. And there's nothing better than start. I think our generation, this is me and you, Jared, I think we've lost a little bit. I think you guys, many of you on the call, I'm seeing a few of the names, are in this baby boomer generation. You did a great job raising us, but I think we maybe need some encouragement to continue that to our children now, because man, I think right now more than ever, I think we need your generation, people on this call, to really be not falling off. It sounded way too much like my book Repurpose, but not riding off the sunset, but like pushing and encouraging your children and making sure you're sharing more of you, whether it be finances or just more importantly, your wisdom with us, and encouraging us to do the same with our kids.
Yep. Amen to that. Just on an additional note to that, everybody on this call will get a copy of Ben's book. If you haven't received one already, you will get a digital copy with that. You will get links to our last online webinar having to do with anticipated taxes in your in your retirement. And just a plug for our podcast, Ben. We do a Retire Repurpose podcast, and that podcast is all about the non-financial part of retirement, but it's exactly in the same wavelength of really passing down wisdom, not just wealth, but wisdom to the next generation. So I just want to echo that with what Ben said. I think that's the most important thing that you can hear on this call for those of you in that age bracket on the call today. That is something that is we need more of, and that's coming from our generation to you guys. I know Ben agrees with that as well. So if you don't have any other last comments or questions out there, I think we'll end it here. Ben, any final words here as we wrap up?
No, I had a lot of fun. I hope it didn't get too boring for anybody. It just, to me, this allows us to share a lot of information to a lot of people really quickly. If anybody on this call is like, I want to have that meeting, make sure to reach out to us. We're willing just to go one-on-one with you and talk about these things with you specifically. But it's been a lot of fun. Appreciate you taking an hour of your day to share it with us. We do value your time today. So thank you very much.
You bet. If you're on this call and you're a client and you want to talk more specifically about this, certainly do that. We're going to make that more of an intentional step with our client meetings here for the next at least several months. And again, this is so near and dear to our hearts. So expect that. Again, if you're not a client and want to have that conversation, like Ben said, reach out to us. We're easy to get a hold of. Our number is 320-222-4236. Check out our website. You probably have been there already. But again, if you're in the area, we would love to sit down and meet with you. And if you're not in the area, we can gladly set up a phone call or a Zoom meeting as well. But let us help you get that conversation started. So it's the top of the hour. We will end it here. Ben, thank you so much. Thank you to everybody on the call here today. We appreciate your time and giving us the opportunity to share with you today. God bless you guys, and we'll see you next time.